Welcome everyone for today, our eighth episode of the Family Life series. I'm Juliana. I'll be the host for today, and I'm a member of Sembradores de Luz. And today on the episode, we are going to discuss about a Spiritist perspective on inclusion with Gláucia and Lígia. I'd like to introduce you, our dear friends Gláucia, Lígia. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.
Very good. So just before we go, I'm going to introduce our guests. I have a little bio from each one. Lovely to read here our the professional and spiritual experience that we bring in today to the discussion. So today we have Gláucia Martin Porath. She has embraced Spiritism since her adolescence, contributing to the multiple Spiritist centers worldwide. Currently volunteering at the Spiritist Center Nosso Lar in San Diego, she continues to share its teachings and support the spiritual growth in her community. Professionally, Gláucia has been a mental health therapist for over 20 years, working with children and family in both Canada and the US. She also has experience in education and social entrepreneurship, emphasizing gender equality at home. Gláucia is married to Jason, a Jewish American, and together they have two young adult sons. Guided by the Spiritist principle, she strives each day to be a positive role model for her family and help others experience the transformative power of this philosophy. Welcome, Gláucia.
Thank you so much.
And I'll introduce our next guest, Lígia Carvalho. Lígia Carvalho serves as the secretary and coordinator of the Spiritist Education Department and bookstores at the Spiritist Center Divine Light in Newark. Newark, yes?
Yeah.
New Jersey?
Newark, New Jersey.
Newark. Because I was going to say New York. No, it's Newark.
Not New York, and there's just some other Newark somewhere else, but it's Jersey.
As a co-founder, she continues to lead the center alongside a dedicated group of friends. She's over 15 years of experience as a licensed therapist. Lígia has dedicated her career supporting children and adolescents facing behavioral and mental health challenges. Additionally, she has worked as a hospice social worker, providing compassionate care to terminally ill patients. Above all, Lígia treasures her role as a wife and loving mother to her daughter and son, considering them her greatest blessing. It is a blessing, our kids, isn't it? Very good. And welcome. We are really happy that you are here. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to ask questions and we discuss about it. I'll start with Gláucia. Gláucia, I'm going to ask a question and ask you to answer, and then I'll invite Lígia to come along.
All right.
Explain a little bit for our viewers how it's going to be our conversation. So first question I have for you, Gláucia. Sorry. To start, how do the Spiritist teachings invite us to view children and young people with physical, mental, and behavioral disabilities? How can this bodily and emotional experience represent missions or evolutionary tests?
It's a wonderful question, really good at the beginning of our live. I think one of the most important notions of Spiritism is that we are eternal spirits, right? We have lived many lives throughout different incarnations, and therefore we are here on earth to become better and better and grow spiritually, right? So if you think in that way, when we have children with young young children with physical, mental, and behavioral disabilities, we have to understand that they're not like a blank canvas, right? They've come to us with like a baggage, if you put it that way, right? Like there are things that they need to grow. There are reasons why they've come with some of those disabilities. So we need to understand that piece, and that this is part of our evolution. If we understand that, also, we understand that according to Spiritism, we kind of plan our incarnation. So a lot of the times, the families know, like, pre-incarnation, right? So in the spiritual world, that those will be the challenges, including the children that are coming with it. So of course we forget when we incarnate, but it is part of a plan. So there is a reason. And in the mercy of, God, of wanting us to really grow spiritually, it's part of our evolution, right? So if we think in that way, it's much easier to embrace the challenges and reframe it not as like an obstacle that you can never overcome, but as a learning lesson, that there is something there is a lesson for us to learn. It's important also to have an attitude, I believe, of empowerment, right? So I don't believe that in like feeling pity for our children or for any of our youngest, that's going to be helpful. Yes, we are compassionate about the challenges, but also we need to understand that if that has been a choice, you also have the strength, right? So to overcome it. So with that in mind, talking about how can that be represent missions or evolutionary tests. If in personal missions, you ended up developing a lot of patience, a lot of resilience, a lot of humility, and a lot of inner strength. In terms of, like, if you think about a collective mission, there's a lot of awakening to solidarity and compassion and moral, like a moral transformation within family and society, because you do whatever you can to support that being that needs to overcome whatever it is. And as like again, as an evolutionary test, right? Like it's a opportunity to repair, opportunity to learn what is it that you needed to learn going through this limitation, if we put in that way. Remembering that what's limited is the physical body, but the spirit is eternal, and the spirit is not limited. So I think that that's my take of that initial question. I hope I answered your question.
You're on mute.
Sorry, my mic's muted. I was here just listening, enjoying the. But yeah, I like it. It's wonderful. Yeah, you put it wonderfully there. And I remember when you said that's part of, it's the spirit planned for that, the family planned for that, And I remember that. Always knowing that I would have a daughter, and it would be difficult. I never knew why or what would be. For me, it was just bring a child, and the world would be it's already a child. And then when it comes, it's I have an autistic child, and when you put like this, and yeah, exactly. When I had the diagnosis, it was as hard as it's for everyone. I said, oh yes, now I know. Now I understand the mission that we have and everything, because the diagnosis is just like a certification that, doctors and therapists can help you. But, it's been there. You always saw something there. But it's interesting. I invite Lígia, you to put your thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Gláucia did it perfectly. It's about a change in perspective. We all have these expectations and perspectives, but when we look from the vision of Spiritism, that shows that we are eternal. And like even the quote says, our body's limited, but not our spirit. It's not that there's something defective. And yet again, if you go back to the understanding of reincarnation, there's, generally speaking, two angles for it. One is the expiation part. We committed some mistakes in the past and now we need to correct them. Or there's the learning part. We just need to go through a different experience. Spiritism teaches us that we're going to go through all different experiences in life through multiple reincarnations, health and sickness, family and orphanage, men, women, rich, poor. And that just is a part of it, because we need to experience these different scenarios to develop our moral understanding, develop our morality overall. And what other way than through living it, right? Because when we're in the spiritual plane, we talk about it, we study it. It's all theories, but then we have to put into practice. So I think if we have the ability to understand from this perspective, and knowing that also life, although it may seem difficult, it may seem long, it may seem challenged, it is not going to be forever. And understand that those experiences is the purpose is to improve, to help us, to allow us to learn something new, and not really from the focus of maybe punishment or other negative things that we may associate with these challenges. Yes, they're not pleasant. You mentioned your son with autism. I had my son with a lot of medical issues. They're never pleasant, but we grow out of it. And so if we're able to just take from that perspective, the burden becomes lesser.
I'm unmute myself.
Question. Should I answer the question or no? I see there.
Yeah,
Can you give an example?
I think you put that you perfectly as well, and it's a profound shift in perspective when we experience this, and when coming in, the beauty of it is like you learn that this Spiritism help you to understand, and it gives you resilience to understand and go through all the obstacle. But of course, it's still not easy for anyone. But really, I'll go for the second question for you, Lígia. What is the mission of parents and guardians when welcoming children with specific special needs or specific needs? How do we deal with our daily limitations, challenge, without losing sight of the spiritual purpose of living together?
So whether it's children with specific needs or just your children in general, right? Parents' mission is really to help them evolve and to guide them, right? We're stewards of their life. I'll piggyback on your comment again. You said once you had the diagnosis, it helped us. So now you know how you can get help, how you can get resources for your child. So that is a parent's role. Whether you're the biological parent or not, whether you're the guardian, Spiritism is very specific, and it says parents have the mission to develop their children through education. That's in the Spirit's book. And also says that they're be giving to us as parents to guide them on the path of good. So I think also what Spiritism helps as far as parental responsibilities, I think a lot of times parents, they focus on, let's say, nutrition. They got to be healthy. They got to be clothed. They have to have a good place to live, a safe place. We need to make sure they're exposed to entertainment and they're exposed to extracurricular activities so they can be well-rounded. And yes, I would believe that most parents have some kind of base of moral behavior in life, right? But I think another important, and once again, speaking from the Spiritist perspective, right, the importance of also exposing them and presenting them to God, to a religious perspective. And overall, that is what parents do, and or should do. I think that the challenge many times is that the children, they don't belong to us, although it feels that way. And as a mom who went through pregnancy and childbirth and nursing, you almost feel like you came from my body. I have control over you. And that's how we feel. But in reality, once again, they're not possessions of ours. We have a period, and Spiritism teaches us that the first, give or take 7 years, it's when even that eternal spirits of, that we mentioned in the question before, they're eternal beings, that intuitive knowledge of who they are, it's sort of dormant. Why? Because God made it so that during those first years, parents could really impress upon their children concepts, ideas, ways of dealing with the world that would culminate when they reach teenagehood, give or take 14, 15, 17, when their understanding of their eternal being starts to really present themselves through behaviorism, their natural tendencies. That's why we say that teenagehood is so challenging, is because they're now becoming more of who they are. So our role is to be able to give them an opportunity to see things from a different perspective, because as they grow in life, there is going to be, who they are as an eternal being and who they want to become. All of us have challenges, right? All of us have areas of improvement. So as parents, it also bestowed upon us to know who our kids are, to know their predispositions, and work to mitigate that. We're going to talk a little more about that in another question, but overall, it's really our role is to guide them and lead them towards the path of good. That's blank out. The other thing is, naturally, we all have expectations of what we think our life will be as parents, as a family. And I would like to meet somebody whose expectations have not been frustrated, right? Whether through divorce and separation or children with special needs. Life is never going to turn out exactly the way that we would like it to be or the way that we plan for it. Doesn't matter how hard we work at it, right? So I think part of dealing with these limitations and challenges is adjusting expectations, right? So if you have a child with special needs, it doesn't mean that you cannot have a full life or your child cannot have a full life. It doesn't mean that you can enjoy things you had planned for your life, but it just may have to adjust. It may not be exactly in the terms that you envisioned, or maybe at the extent that you would like, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up your dreams. It's more about recalibrating and readjusting how to achieve those goals instead of focusing on the lack of completion to the fullest of what your goals were, because we're never going to get everything we want. Even if we have absolutely, healthy kids with no limitations, they are not going to be what we want. And they're not going to give us the family image or the mother and child relationship or father and child relationship. So it's really, whether you have a special child or not, is adjusting who to whom they are and what they are able to give, in this life. I think those are some of the highlights.
That's beautiful. Yes, and I'm firmly believe how we should observe instead of worrying so much. We have to teach them this or that, but observe. And in the Spiritism also, we learn that actually we have to be the example.
Exactly.
So we have to actually watch ourselves, because our kids will mirror in ourselves. So if we ask to do this, that, and that, and we're not actually living in accordance, is the same. Gláucia, I'd like to invite you to give some comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so well answered, Lígia. Thank you so much. I think you touched on unconditional love, Lígia, when you were talking about, everything. And that acceptance of their own authenticity and their own individual person. Because when I have 2 children, and they are completely different from one another. right? Regardless of a disability, special needs, whatever. It's like, it's really honoring their soul, you know? And I think it's so right to talk about role modeling, how important is that we look within to see what is it that we are doing, right? To role model behaviors that, and, you know, thoughts, you know, words and action that are in accordance with what we believe spiritually, and passing that on, because words are not enough. They're gonna be, as you said, Juliana, like observing every single thing about us, right? So loving unconditionally, then serving them with so much patience, like, again, respecting their individuality. And I think one important thing I want to just add in terms of disabilities or special needs is never forgetting to encourage their autonomy and like and authenticity, because really easy to do it for them, and, you know, because sometimes it is a challenge for them, but really like empowering them and believing that they can do it, and being patient to help them doing. So there's a lot of like surrender to the process and perseverance, and that, you know, that strengthens our faith and our way of dealing with them. It's always it's a lesson that it's for them, but for us as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So we often talking about inclusion in the world, but Gláucia, are we really prepared to live in inclusion in our own homes? What social or family behaviors will reinforce exclusion and even unintentional exclusion?
I was really thinking about that question, and I think it's a difficult question to answer. We prepare to live inclusion. I think we have to think about ourselves. What does that mean first? What is inclusion for us? And you know, I think I want to go back into the fact that honoring each individual authentically, and each person in the way that they are, honoring without the stories about them. Like, because if you think about neurodivergence, for example, let's talk about ADHD. And my older son has also ADHD. Now he's almost 22. Things really developed, like he's doing really great. But I growing up, I had to understand his brain. I like to say a superpower brain. So you again, like going back to what Lígia mentioned before, like you can reframe your perspective. It's the way that you're gonna look into how that soul that has come for you to care for is, not what is out there in the model of the conditioning of expectations of society, right? But what is it, like, what is it that that child has to offer, and what you have to offer in exchange? So I think that acceptance of who they are, and looking also for what are the strengths. A lot, like I like to say to parents, like whatever you focus on multiplies, right? So focus on strengths, focus on what is unique about it. And I'll tell you about ADHD, because they have a brain that absorbs like the whole world like in a minute. They have this very high capacity for creativity, for understanding. They read the room immediately. They feel people's feelings. So you know, that's their superpower. So like always looking for what is it that they are bringing, like that is inclusive, right? What is inclusive about that difference? We are all different, right? It's like I'm different, you guys are different. So it's so important that we, instead of wanting all to be the same, we actually celebrate differences, right? So we by celebrating who they are, then we are creating inclusion at home. And by also looking at the conditioning outside in the world, and then looking to your family and saying, is that what I want for my family? Like, create the values that are important to your family, and according to the moral and teaching of Jesus and the things that are important for you. And it doesn't need to be, we're talking here within the Spiritism, but any other religion, doesn't matter, that what's important to you, and invest on your children from that place, investing on them in their couple. If they are not capable of doing one thing, they're definitely capable of doing other things. And I think in terms of being a mother and a therapist, I like to also remember the place where sometimes you could tend to overprotect children with disabilities, and that is also not helpful, or sometimes compare siblings. I like to say, don't do that, because children are so different, and it's not that one is here and the other is there. That doesn't mean anything. It means that they're just different, their evolution, right? We are all spiritually different in the levels of school grades that we are. Earth is a big school, so which grade are we? We're all in different grades, right? And then celebrating versus shaming about differences, because shame will paralyze and isolate, and that's the inclusion. We want to integrate. And yeah, I think that's that answers for me what we were talking about.
That's wonderful. Yes, is especially because it's hard, and we feel sometimes so tired, and I know sometimes we end up not embracing their differences, and we end up comparing, and even and sometimes, and then we stop and no, wait, we have to be more patient, and stuff. That's very interesting. Lígia, can I invite you to comment and as well to add a little bit more?
Sure. I think you gave a perfect example, and Gláucia touched on all the relevant points about not shaming and acceptance. And I think when we go back to, once again, Spiritism, right? And the spirits ask, what is the greatest obstacle to progress? And the spirits answer very directly, pride and selfishness, right? So we know that we are all filled with pride and selfishness in different levels. Therefore, we are going to act in an imperfect manner. We are going to make mistakes. So are we really prepared to live in inclusion in our homes 100%? No, we're not. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it. So, you gave the segue when you said sometimes we're tired and we're like, oh no, maybe I need to take a step back, or I need to stop. Or at times we need to be the model and the example, like you guys discussed, and we need to be the ones to apologize to our children. I'm sorry, I was stressed. I was, I had my own personal issues, and I didn't have the patience, or, I wasn't able to control my frustration. I took it out on you. And being able to have those conversations with our children, in whatever level functioning that they are, because we are all imperfect beings and we are going to make mistakes. So if we know that we are imperfect and that we are going to make mistakes, and then when we do make a mistake, it doesn't become a moment of shaming or embarrassment or all those confusions, but once again, it becomes a moment of growth. And that's, again, the reshaming. And I'm also very strengths perspective. So yes, Gláucia, I'm 100% with you, always looking for the strengths, because we all have them. So if we start focusing more on the strengths than on the challenges, it's not that we're ignoring the challenges, but we are utilizing the expansion of our strengths to be better able to address those challenges. And if we all recognize that we are imperfect beings, that we all have our negative tendencies, when something happens, if somebody did something wrong, we can better work towards understanding and forgiving. And if we did something wrong, we can model the process of humility and apology. And that way we can become a family that's working towards evolution and progress. So I think those are some of the core things for us to think. And also taking consideration too, we are eternal beings. We all have had prior reincarnations. And there's a reason why we reincarnate in the way we do, where we do, and the family in which we do. Sometimes reincarnate with members that we have affinity, that we like, but there are other times that we reincarnate with spirits with whom we both failed, that we have a dissonance. So there might be times where the relationships are more challenging, or other times where the relationship are more pleasant and easier because of those differences. But at the long run, if we think about the overall objective is for evolution improvement, we can all understand there'll be, errors and mistakes in the process, but we're going to continue to work towards betterment.
That's great. Include, as you said, inclusion isn't just about the physical access. Lígia, what can you say to present? How can we? Oh, that we have a question here. Let's gonna get a question here. Sorry. What can you say to a parent who has 3 children with disability and feels discouraged? How can Spiritism help? This is a great question. And Lígia, Gláucia, feel free to bring your thoughts here.
I mean, the first thing would be to acknowledge, yes, you have lots of reasons to feel discouraged. Maybe not so much because of the disability, but if you think of 3 children with disability, imagine the amount of responsibility and work and dedication and planning that this person has to have, depending on how significant the disabilities are. Worrying about, what if something happens to me? What if I'm sick? So I think the first thing is to validate, acknowledge it is not an easy situation. We said it before, nobody would prefer, right? Let's put it this way. Let me get my words. If you had a choice between a child without disability and a child with disability, I think most people would go towards a child without disability because we want to protect our children, which I think was something that Gláucia was mentioning. Sometimes we try to overprotect and we want them to not have to deal with challenges. But then when we go through the Spiritism philosophy and understand that these challenges, they are the means by which that spirit, that child can grow and become better and either learn a significant lesson or correct mistakes from the past, we now understand that that situation is not a situation that we should pity or feel bad about or feel sorry about. Yes, it's difficult, but it's something that can, in the long run, bring happiness, bring positive results. So really, helping the mom would be part of it, understanding these challenges, understand these situations. But I think it's really about helping the mom to be connected, whether it's with support systems, whether it's with the school, whether it's long-term planning for their child, whether it's informal support, how is the family, how are other people around, and really working through any emotions that the mom may have regards to guilt or abandonment or blame, and understand. So, it's a very complex situation, and you can't easily respond in 2 seconds, but it really would be working, validating, because it is really difficult and it can feel discouraging, helping to do a shift in understanding of why of that situation, and then helping to better organize and plan for current and long-term resources so that there's a sense of safety and security for herself and her children. Those would be some, points to consider over a long period of time.
It takes a village.
Yes.
Gláucia.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything. I think the village is, it is very important. Also to remind that is for all parents out there, that is not, I know Lígia mentioned mom, because normally we are the default parent, right? We are the ones who we were conditioned to go there and do everything for our children. We carry the mental load, we carry the caregiving. So I think it's important to remember to reach out to your partner. Sometimes we also have different families, moms and moms, dads and dads. So in terms of that, I think I want to really emphasize that the support system and sharing the load, because carrying it alone first is not meant for no one. It's not meant for you to carry it alone. And in terms of how Spiritism can help, like if you have a Spiritist center in your city, and if they have evangelization, I don't know how you say it in English.
Spiritist education.
Yeah,
it's gospel or kids education, yeah.
Spiritual education for the children, to enroll them in that. I think that's very important, because yes, you're going to need a lot of support. And don't forget the self-care piece. I love to use the metaphor for parents that when you're going on the airplane, then you need to put the oxygen mask on yourself first if something happened, and then you help your children or elderly people. And this is a must for parents who have children with disabilities. You need to really engage in self-care, invest in your self-care.
Absolutely.
That's great. I think we had another question, but I just asked. But anyway, if we can get that shown again, I'll ask. For now, let's gonna go back to Lígia. Lígia, how can we also welcome those who face internal pain, mental disorder, or atypical behavior? How can we transform judgment into empathy and appreciation of differences?
So this is a wonderful question that could result into a seminar. So
Yeah.
I'll do the best I can to, pinpoint some of the main concepts. As far as welcoming, children with any type of atypical behavior, we have to think along the lines of what we were talking before, observations, right? We need to look at our children from, I would say, even now in retrospect, I can look back at my 2 pregnancies and see how certain aspects of those pregnancies were related or seem to be related to their behavior. But if you're not the biological parent, like we said, it can be a grandparent, it can be an adoptive parent, it doesn't matter. It's really about observing the child and looking at their tendencies. Do they tend to be empathetic? Do they tend to be short-tempered? Are they easily frustrated with certain emotions or certain behaviors? But you have to also do in the context of developmental stages, right? It is normal for a 1 to 2-year-old child to have temper tantrums. That is how they a lot of times express emotions and frustrations. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something atypical with them. So, part of is studying your children, learning about children. If you're not sure, you can seek out professional support, professional guidance to try to differentiate those things so that you can be able to attend to those needs early on. Remember, our mission is to guide them towards good. And it starts, the sooner that we can start, the better. So it's very important that we know our children for what they are. And I think kind of linking to a lot of things that we said, like pride and selfishness, and something that Gláucia said that I think is very impactful, overprotecting. I think the challenge is that parents tend to, when parents are overprotective, when they try to provide the safety and the support and avoid any kind of challenge to their children, they end up doing more harm than good, because children don't have an opportunity to learn to self-regulate. They don't have the opportunity to learn to deal with conflict resolutions. They don't have an opportunity to deal with a lot of things. And once again, this applies to children in general, but especially to children with special needs. Just because they have the special needs, it does not mean that they're not able to learn. It does not mean that they're not able to evolve and make progress. It may take longer. It may require special techniques or interventions. It may even require the intervention of a specialist, but there are resources that can allow them to make this progress. So as far as us welcoming them, it goes back to that. We being able to appreciate and understand who they are, their potential, adjusting our expectations, right? When we study the gospel reinforces to us that there's two types of sources of afflictions. And I'm sorry, I'm babysitting my child. This is not my dog. I apologize for the interruption. I'm babysitting her and she's here crying. So when we look at the causes of affliction in life, right? And we talked about these situations our children are a source of challenging and difficulty, right? The gospel uses the word affliction for any situation that may cause us the stress and conflict and so forth. So they say that there's two primary causes. One is the cause of pre-existence, right? Things that we may have done in prior reincarnations that resulted in consequences in this life, where we need to address those consequences and make corrections. Once again, not punishment, but corrections. But there's another primary cause, which is present day life. And I think that if we are able to better focus on present day life situations, even the children that legitimately have mental disorders, atypical behavior, special disability, they can be more successful if we are able to apply a lot of the things that we have talked about, understand that these things are not punishment. They're not a source of embarrassment. They're not something that comes as a distressful situation to make us suffer, right? So readjusting the perspective, being honest about our children. And I think that's part of the challenge. We don't want many times to think that our children are this or that or this other thing. But the moment that we accept them unconditionally, that we love for whom they are, we become better able to see their limitations and their deficits and work towards helping them to overcome it. So I think it's different. A lot of times when we talk about welcoming and not being judgmental, people become confused between agreeing and disagreeing. To be welcoming, to being accepting doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with certain behaviors or some perspectives or some attitudes. But I still love you. I still care for you. I just have a different perspective. And I think that if we become those parents that either agree with everything or support everything, we don't put limits, we don't put boundaries, we don't put consequence, acceptance and teaching, they're not the same thing. So we need to accept our children as independent human beings. They need to have the ability to express themselves, but also as parents, we need to teach them limits. We need to teach them from right from wrong. So I think it's a process where we have to mingle all of these things together. As adults, when they have psychologically, physiologically developed, they're in a better place to be able to make those decisions on their own. But when they're children, that welcoming and that non-judgmental doesn't mean not disciplining them, not disagreeing with them, not going against them on, especially when you think of teenagers. If we say yes to everything a teenage kid asks or wants, oh my God, we're done for it, right? So I think that's the conflict that a lot of parents struggle with, is balancing, and we're focusing on parents, but I think as a society in general, balancing accepting the individual, but not necessarily agreeing with everything that individual presents. And that comes also with the concept of judgment. If you look through the Spirit's book too, there's, questions 873 and on, if anybody wants to research, it talks about the idea of justice and injustice. And the Spirit teaches us that sense of justice is so natural that any idea of injustice is appalling to us. But they also say that a lot of times our passions, our imperfections, our limitations, they mingle those sentiments and corrupt it. And then we have false viewpoints. So it becomes that struggle that we see. Am I being judgmental? Am I being supportive? Am I being a good parent and setting limits? And it's really hard for parents because we don't want to be judgmental. But on the same token, we feel judged many times. I mean, parents with children with special needs, especially if you're going out in the society, I can imagine going to the supermarket, people may stare, or if your child behaves in a certain way, people don't understand and they give you the dirty looks. So it's a constant battle. And a lot of times parents try to overcompensate that. And it's like, oh my God, he doesn't understand, or life is already difficult, or this or that. But if you go back to our main purpose is to guide them towards good, to help them overcome their own limitations, and understand that a lot of times challenges, they exist, or maybe predispositions exist, but the full symptomology, let's put it this way, of that predisposition doesn't need to result into something negative. I'm gonna, I guess use Gláucia's example. I appreciate that very much. She mentioned that her son has ADHD. We work with children with ADHD, and we see the difference that a good parent makes. And good, I don't mean a good or bad parent, they're kind, but a parent that has the understanding of how to handle. And sometimes if there are parents who doesn't have the knowledge or don't have the self-regulation, a lot of times they resort to punishment or shaming or yelling, or they don't seek out services, versus a good parent that provides the support, the stability, the resources. So having a limitation or a special need doesn't mean being limited. Like she shared an example of her son, congratulations. So that welcoming is not ignoring the need to discipline, the need to set limits, the need to teach them to behave socially appropriate in spite of their limitations. Because at the end of the day, we're just looking for them to be happy, successful individuals. And to do that, we need to learn to live in a society in a responsible manner. One last thing, and because I know our time is rushing, there's a new perspective that's being presented, a new terminology in the field of mental health. And we talk a lot about suicidal empathy, which is this aspect where we become so empathetic. We try to be so supportive. We try to be so understanding that we do too much. It's like the water overflows. And instead of helping, we harm. And, in ways, how are some examples we can give? A parent that excuses their child behavior because they have some kind of limitation, or a parent that does it for their child instead of giving them the opportunity to learn because they have a limitation. So sometimes we try to be too supportive, and that also is not healthy. So it's really finding that balance of accepting, understanding, but also setting limits and expectations, no matter what their special needs are, and making them accountable and responsible for themselves. So that was sort of like a little summary. Thank you.
There you go. I'm mute. Okay. Thank you, Lígia, for the insights. Yes, we have to wrap up, and maybe I'll ask Gláucia to just give a quick insight on how can faith and resilience, emotional strength, families living challenge realities with children or relatives with special needs. Since you spoke about strengthening, tell me, wraps up with all.
I think faith, right? Like, it's very important for us to remember that we don't have the control, that God is in control, that there is a reason why we are where we are, and that we also have to remember that we have an invisible team helping us. It's very easy to get lost, and because we don't see them, or some of us see them, but like in feeling alone, like that parent has mentioned, which is very normal. It happens all the time. We're reaching out to our faith and trust that we are where we are, dealing with what we are dealing with for a reason. And if the obstacle was given, so has the strength. And search for professional help, your extended community support, your family, your religion, whatever that is. I think no struggle is meaningless, right? And the investment in love and is never wasted. So just remember that there is a reason why we are going through this. So I know we're out of time, so I want to make it short. And just one more thing, if we can remember on how to help those things to increase, is never forget gospel at home, family prayer time, focusing on being grateful for what is it that we already have, and then supporting each other with like mutual encouragement and and getting on that phone call and like asking for help. We can always do that. So that's about it.
That's wonderful. Very wonderful comments from Lígia and Gláucia. Thank you very much for being here and providing such great insights and all the information that helps us go through life with special disabilities, special needs. As
It
a
was
better
a
term
pleasure to
for
be
it.
here, Juliana. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you, Juliana. Seeing you again, Gláucia, and being here with everyone. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you everyone at home for watching and being here with us.
Have a lovely Sunday, everybody.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.